folks who established the Community Health Endowment and invested these dollars so wisely would share my joy in watching kids, walk away with their peppers and families planning their meals. So there's so much talk as of late about government programs that aren't successful. It's really my privilege to talk about a program that I think is very successfully meeting the goals and aspirations of the original founders of the Community Health Endowment. So today, I am joined by some of the folks who have stewarded the endowment over time. I would be remiss not to also thank Councilman Beckius, who's been one of our trustees in the past, but joined by our chair, Russ Grunwald, our funding chair, Michelle Peterson, and our finance chair, Blake Anderson. And it's really the forward thinking of the founders, the stewards at the city, and the volunteers that make sure our endowment is as effective as it possibly can be. Our impact is, of course, not just financial, but financially we have been able to invest over $43 million into the community, and each of those dollars to me represents a kid who has a healthier meal, a mother who's received access to prenatal care, and even a dollar that has been leveraged because our resources were made available. Our investments have performed well over time. This chart may be just a tad hard to see, but that blue line in the middle demonstrates the Community Health Endowment performance over time. You all know from last year's presentation that in 2022, we had sort of a perfect storm of some financial circumstances, skipped a funding cycle, but are well back on track. And that's when I pass the baton to Blake Anderson, who can tell you a little bit more about our performance and about our recovery plan. So to you, Blake.
Yeah, perfect, thanks. So just to give you the actual numbers on this chart, so again, the blue line in the middle is the endowment. So 2024, it returned 10.2%. That was right in the middle of the S&P, so the equity index is the top, I'll call that gray line, at 25%, and bonds were a meager 1.3, but kind of what we would expect. All those figures are positive, but down from 2023, but also, I will say, kind of ahead of our projections. So it's helped get the endowment back on some good financial footing, especially given what happened in 2022. So on the financial footing kind of topic, so just to refresh or to educate, so in 2022, we hit the perfect storm for the endowment, which had really never happened. So the markets were down, both equity markets as well as fixed income, and inflation kind of went through the roof. And the endowment is based on an inflation-adjusted value. And so our goal is always to keep it at 100%. And if we get below 90, we put in some kind of smoothing mechanisms to reduce the granting to kind of keep the endowment strong. So in 2022, we ran into that scenario. So with negative returns in the market and significant inflation, it dropped below 90%. And so in an effort to not totally remove funding for an extended period of time, we put in this 10-year recovery plan. To kind of reduce grant values, but smooth the approach and build it back over the years. And just as an aside, so 90% is kind of that target. At about our low point, we were about 75% of inflation-adjusted value. So it got a little dicey there for a while in terms of where we're at, but it has come back nicely. So the slide here says our recovery plan is on track, and I would actually call it ahead of schedule. It's based on a handful of assumptions. So if these assumptions don't hold out, then that'll impact kind of what the glide path looks like. But working with our investment advisor, Fiducient, they provided us some kind of long-range assumptions, both in terms of returns and inflation. So the return assumption is 7.8%. That's based on, I should say, our asset allocation, our target allocation is 70% equities and 30% fixed income. So some balance there. But 7.8% return assumption and about a 2.5% inflation assumption are the big things driving kind of this 10-year recovery plan. We've got this grant smoothing that I mentioned, so that kind of started with a reduced grant amount, and then we're increasing at about a pace of 18% per year. So increasing the amount that we grant every year. We do have a commitment, so one of the legacy projects, which we'll talk about in a little bit here, is the Cultural Center project. So that is baked into the grant amounts, and you'll see that in the subsequent slide, kind of how that plays in and where that comes into play in the next couple of years. Based on kind of these current assumptions and where we think things are going to be at, we hope to have the balance really back at 100% in about 4 years. And again, it talks about that, every time we essentially gain more than 7.8%, we make a little bit more further progress towards the goal. So this is just a look. So there's kind of two pieces going on this chart. So the gray bars are the grant budgets by fiscal year. So what I will point out is in these first 3 years, you'll notice that the bars are significantly higher. That is due to the Cultural Center project. So there's a $5 million grant commitment there. The timing of when that's actually going to get distributed is a little unknown. It's not set in stone. So in the initial assumptions, we've got $2 million this year, next year, and then $1 million in that 26-27 year. I will tell you, I think, and Kate will articulate this maybe in the next couple slides, I think that's probably going to be pushed back. I don't think we'll get $2 million most likely distributed out this year for the Cultural Center project. And then you'll see kind of, so as that gray bar drops, but then you can see that kind of smoothing or that 18% increase over time. The last thing I'd point out, so the blue and orange lines, so the blue line is what we're projecting the inflation adjusted balance or target of the fund would be, and then the orange, assuming that 7.5 or 7.8% return. So you can see in that 2028, 2029 is kind of that crossover point, assuming we get those averages. But I always like to say the market never works in averages, both in terms of inflation and returns. So there will be some variability to this, but it's nice to at least see on the kind of the forecasted glide path that we're on the right track. And it's been quite a change from 2022, and feels good to be back on solid footing and getting those grant budgets back to normal levels. I went over that fairly quick, but any questions on any of the numbers?
No, just a big curiosity about this first quarter. Maybe the second quarter.
Yeah, and it's it is hung in pretty well. We'll see what March is going to be down, but actually the balance from the end of 2024 to the end of February, we're actually up. But March has been a different story.
Yeah.
Quick question on that. On the grant, is it on the grant making side of the equation? Are we pausing then a lot of the grants, or just not extending, or other than the cultural centers?
No,
I guess
we've been able to continue at a slower pace.
Sure.
And that's due to the good work of Blake and the finance committee to give us a more modest target. So that we can keep dollars flowing, but at a pace that makes a little bit more sense for the long-term projections. In 2022, we did skip a grant cycle, which helped us a little bit with that.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate it.
And I think you heard the good council members that you're not off the hook yet.
Okay, yes, I did hear that. The questions were going to come later. I thought I'd try and sneak it in, but yeah, that's perfect.
Thank you, Councilman Carlson, for the question. I think it's a nice transition to what our funding priorities are for 24-25. I know from last year's presentation you're familiar with our Place Matters report, which is our data-driven look at the performance of health in the city. That report really informs our funding strategies, and the 4 priorities we have for 24-25 are early and adequate prenatal care, healthy food access, youth fitness, mental wellness, and human connection. During the fall of 2024, we awarded 11 grants for a total of $346,985 over 3 years. So some of those grants are one-year grants, some of those grants are multi-year grants. We're currently reviewing 28 grants for our spring cycle. That is about 30% or so up from previous application cycles, a little bit more demand this time around. Those announcements will come late May, and we are prepared for a second grant cycle in the fall of 2025. want to share with you just a few brief examples of some of the projects that we've been able to invest in, partly because they're inspiring and they're part of the work of making Lincoln the healthiest city in the nation, but also because a number of our projects, there's an intersection with the visions and work of the City Council. One of those, I think, is the Lincoln Bike Kitchen, which is in the Telegraph District, which is an area I know this council has watched carefully and invested in and supported. Our dollars helped to renovate the municipal pool building and use it for the bike kitchen's purposes. I think it's in great shape. Some of our committee members got to tour it last year. A couple of notes about this grant award. One is that it was a 1-to-1 match of our $25,000. So it's just a nice, clean example of how our investment can leverage additional dollars, whether philanthropic or private grant dollars. The other is that it has helped this particular organization think bigger. And in 2025, they aspire to give away 2,000 bikes, which is a pretty significant increase. The mother in me is also pleased to report that they provide helmets and locks as well. Another site visit I wanted to share with you falls in our category of early and adequate prenatal care. The Asian Community Cultural Center is doing some really impressive work that is both bilingual and culturally informed to help women from varying backgrounds have a community health worker that is an expert in their healthcare field, but also has that cultural liaison responsibility and training that makes it very successful for those women. One brief example that I thought was really a good one is they have provide training for Sudanese women on how to prevent gestational diabetes. So I think that reflects a really specific understanding of both the population and a healthcare concern and a way of bringing those together in a way that prevents deeper healthcare needs for both mom and baby. It's also worth mentioning that their healthcare screenings have also included a referral component. And what we know about postpartum depression to mental health care, which you know, Councilman, that's not always easy if you're a person whose insurance is through Medicaid. So making that connection for someone who both has a type of insurance that's not as easily accessible and a non-English speaker really makes a difference for someone, who, especially when they're dealing with those postpartum mental health care concerns. As Blake alluded to, welcome, Councilman. As Blake alluded to, we have several what we call legacy projects. These are projects that we've made a bigger or longer term commitment to. I want to highlight two for you this afternoon. One is the Cultural Centers of Lincoln, which I believe we shared a little bit about with you last year, but I know you're very familiar. I know you're supporters as well. This is important to us for a couple of reasons. One is that it's really located in one of the census tracts that our Place Matters reports have identified as socially vulnerable. So we appreciate the opportunity to partner with them and make sure that services are provided in that area. But also because the Cultural Centers of Lincoln together serve over 18,000 individuals in the city, most of whom are racial or ethnic minorities, and we know those folks come with some additional barriers to accessing the healthcare they need. So we're really proud to be a part of this project. The public announcement is coming soon, you're probably aware. I've received a preview, maybe some of you have too, but I think you'll all be thrilled with the designs and the drawings. Really a very welcoming space that they are building together. The last report I have on the cultural centers was in January, but the spreadsheet that they shared with me is that they are 61% towards their goal, which I think is impressive progress. Another legacy project that I wanted to share about is the Brave Faces Initiative through the Brave Bee Child Advocacy Center. This is really digging deeper into trauma-informed care, especially for children that are served by Brave Bee who have experienced abuse in their young lives, and really taking that trauma-informed approach. ACEs, if you're not familiar, my guess is many of you are, but ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. It's an index or a survey of a child's life experiences that can help a practitioner assess what they may have experienced and design a more specific response to their care. So this project now has a 3-year plan. They have hired a community impact officer. They've started a parent training to help parents deal with the outcomes of abuse. And I think they're very much well on their way towards becoming an institution for the city of Lincoln. In addition to our grant making, we do several community initiatives. We've talked a little bit about Place Matters. We're very involved in numerous community coalitions, and we try to lead community conversations to help our community explore different healthcare issues, innovative healthcare strategies, and think a little bit ahead in terms of some of our upcoming healthcare needs. Last year, our conversations were related to youth mental health and social media use and peer support for mental wellness. We'll do more conversations in 2025. I have 2 more slides, so hang with me just a little bit longer. I do want to spend a few minutes looking ahead to some of the projects that the Community Health Endowment will be investing in the future. One is the Belmont neighborhood, and I should say thank you to the council members who are supporting Belmont. I think it's really in a place where it's growing every day and revitalizing with a genuine community-led approach, which is, I think, impressive. And I know that Councilman, sorry? What?
I was trying to fill in Brody's last name. Think of the grill.
I know that many of you have attended the neighborhood open houses and supported that community. So
Sorry.
we appreciate that. We've taken a sort of an unusual approach to supporting the Belmont neighborhood. It's innovative, I think, for the Community Health Endowment to partner with the Lincoln Community Foundation to invest in the redevelopment plan, and we're proud to be a part of that work. It's worth reporting that some of the initial data on the open houses have indicated that healthcare and healthcare access are priorities in that community.
I have a question.
Yeah.
We talk about Belmont. What area does that include now?
I cannot tell you the geographic parameters verbally. I'm happy to show you a map.
Okay.
Does anyone represent?
First to 14.
Yeah.
Yeah, first.
Adams.
Like 180.
Does it include that area north of Superior, between 14th and 27th?
I wouldn't call that Belmont, but
No.
No.
Matt,
Well-
Kate would have a map that would tell us for sure.
Yeah.
Well, and I will say that there's been a lot of conversation with a lot of the community stakeholders of, what they consider to be the Belmont neighborhood. I know that was one of the very initial conversations of, figuring out truly where that boundary ends, because there are a lot of kids that come from West Lincoln but go to Belmont for
Right.
elementary school or vice versa. And so I think that's actually something our community's been having a conversation with. But yeah, it's that geographic boundary.
Because then even 180 kind of cuts it in half, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The walkable Belmont neighborhood.
Yep.
Yeah.
Happy to follow up with the map. It is of relevance just because defining the geographical area of the redevelopment plan does limit what you
I
can.
just kind of wondered about it myself, that's all.
No. We'll follow up, Councilman. The last project I wanted to share an update about is the Youth Fitness Sports and Opportunity Task Force. Councilwoman Washington has been at the table with this task force, and I hope you've been pleased with the outcomes. We really have felt like it's been a positive experience. Blake has served as a board representative, and I think it's a team that's been really successful and collaborative. The report is nearly ready to go. We're waiting for sort of the right moment in time to release that report so we can get the most bang for our buck. We have established a steering committee out of that task force to help us kind of decide what some of the next steps might be. So that steering committee is calling a few of those shots, but look forward to sharing some of those recommendations with all of you. They fall in the categories of early childhood and K through 12 education, healthcare, establishing a backbone organization, and some facilities recommendations so that we can leverage the sports facilities that we already have in this community.
I would just interject that one of the first slides you showed, the bike kitchen.
Yeah.
Not that it's not going to rest with the bike kitchen, but one of the goals of the the youth fitness program is just so exciting. I mean, it makes so much sense that every kid learns to ride a bike. Every single kid learns to ride a bike. So.
And that is the state of the endowment. I am happy to take questions and or defer questions to Blake.
Madam Chair?
Yes, any,
Well,
Councilman Webb.
well, it's not a, yep, thank you, Chair Washington. It's not a question by any means, but I appreciate all the work that the Community Health Endowment does, but especially the commitment that the endowment has made to Belmont in partnership with the Community Foundation that you spoke to. You know, attending the open houses, attending the city created by the Belmont Community Center. It's really an investment that this neighborhood has needed to see. And I appreciate the endowment making that a possibility, especially as an alum of the Belmont Community Center. You know, it's especially special to me, but I really appreciate all the work and effort that the Community Health Endowment has put into investing in that neighborhood. It's really important for our city.
I'll share that both with the staff and with the community stakeholders
Thank
at
you.
Belmont. They're the ones doing the work. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah. Any other comments or questions? Oh, Michelle.
I'd love the numbers that Kate put up from some of the different projects, because some of those were from our visitation to those different areas. And that's one of the things being on the Community Health Endowment that I think is really cool, is that we get to go out and meet with our partners that we're growing projects throughout Lincoln. And so for us, that's always cool for me to see, to know that, hey, look at this, and that's cool, and we get to go and see how cool it is. So.
I have a question. You mentioned that you have 28 grant proposals. That's a 30% or so increase in the number of grant proposals that you typically get. Are there specific areas or interesting areas where people are asking? Like, what's the hot topic or issue?
That's a great question, Councilwoman. I would say that they represent all 4 of our funding areas. I think that we have seen probably a few more additional applications related to youth fitness, and I think that's an outcome of the steering committee's work. But I think they're a nice representation. They're also, and maybe of relevance to this particular audience, they are across the city. And I appreciate that they kind of hit every quadrant of the city. And I think that's part of our work to make sure that our resources go citywide.
Quick questions. Have you guys changed your investment strategy over the last year? It's a question I ask every year, still 30-70 split?
Yeah, still 30-70. I think our investment advisor made some small changes just within some of those pockets. You know, I think they eliminated their global bond exposure, which was 1% of the total. So
Okay.
very minimal. One thing we did, and I think this was 2 years ago, kind of coming out of 2022, is it's part of that 30% fixed income, but we do have a 3% allocation to cash, so which ends up being about a little over $2 million of cash that's kind of there to fund some of those future priorities. So that was probably the biggest change that we've made in the last couple of years, but this year, no major changes.
And then it looks like from the 10-year recovery plan that was implemented a few years ago, as was stated, it looks like you're going to be a few years ahead of that 10-year with that mark. And are you, I can't remember, so please help me here. Are you allowed to increase funding once you go over the 90% mark? Is that correct? If my memory serves me correctly. That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
There-
Okay.
There are 3 lanes, and each
Right.
of the
90
3 lanes have different rules,
Okay.
just
So-
to keep us honest.
Yes. I guess my question is that over the next few years, do we anticipate that funding will incrementally increase over the next 4 years until we get back to that 100% mark? Because we're within that 90% window of being able to increase funding a little bit, or does the projection anticipate funding remaining virtually flat over the next 4 years in order to get back to that 100% mark before funding increased? Or is there a philosophy at this point in time? I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. I think the short answer is I think there will be an increase, and I think that kind of that smoothing approach of roughly the 18% increase will slowly move up. Some of the timing of the cultural center disbursement, just because that's a bigger number, will have an impact on that. We go through a 2-year budget cycle, so we'll start that about a year from now. So I would expect that as a time for us to kind of look, okay, where are we at? Have these assumptions changed? Is inflation come up or down? Return assumptions, how have those changed? But I could see a point, depending on where we're at next year, where we would look at to say, okay, do we go something beyond that 18% smoothing
Sure.
and start to
And
increase
the
it?
primary reason I ask is because we're 4 years out at 18%, then we have room for additional funding to go out if those projections remain.
Right, yeah,
specific.
yeah, so.
Okay.
So,
And
yeah.
maybe 2 small comments there. One is that, I'm still learning about how our financial advisors work.
Yeah.
But their initial presentation at the beginning of 2025, their 2 descriptors were volatility and fragility. And so I think that we have heard that, and it probably leads to more caution with the funding committee. The other maybe small bit of color commentary is that the cultural centers, how that project plays out has a big impact on how much room we have to maneuver. I don't want to get ahead of them. I don't want to say too much about what is really their project to manage. But it's a good faith understanding that because we are on a reimbursement basis, and so are the American Rescue Plan funds, that the American Rescue Plan funds will flow out first because they have a deadline.
Yep.
And so I think there's just a little bit of uncertainty in terms of when this cultural center dollars will be needed, and then how our funding picture responds.
Sure. And State Street, still the advisor?
Fiduciant is the advisor, yeah. And that was 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah, so I think they're just over 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Clay.
Mhm.
Appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments?
Is this term 3, Michelle? Term 2? Just 2? Okay. Michelle's coming back for more fun.
I'll just add, I really appreciate the leadership that you're taking and being not only just a grant making agency, but also pushing us forward and thinking a lot further down the line. So really appreciate that. Just want to encourage that type of thought and behavior too going forward. I think that's a really exciting thing for us.
I will share that, Councilman, with the Board of Trustees. I think I'm on week 8, so that forward-thinking credit certainly goes to this team and the rest.
The train wheels are off now.
8 weeks,
I think we get more lead time than 8 weeks.
Yeah. You get a full quarter.
Maybe I'm at 10. I'm
We'll take the whole quarter. Okay. Well, thank you so much. It's always really good to get the annual report. And I know that many of us engage with CHE throughout the year. So thank you for welcoming us into those conversations when they arise.
Thanks for your time and attention.
Thank you. Thank you. And Russ, happy birthday. You don't look 100.
No, actually, it's Lincoln General Hospital.
Oh, that's right.
That's right. 100 years. Which was, of